Hello, where and welcome to Scientology Money Project on YouTube with your host Jeffrey Augustine. Had a question for you. Had a question for you. How odd would it be? How odd would it be for a deranged, brutal cult built around Space Lord Xenu and the esoteric system, certain parts of Aleister Crowley, to be engaging in grifting? I created this graphic, and I want to talk about grifting for a couple of reasons. Uh, Online grifting gets thrown around a lot, and and the title of this video is um, the Xenu grift, uh, and I think that we should talk about science. That should become the new colloquial term for it, the Xenu grift. So I'm going to make a case, and this is going to be a series of videos. It's the grift. I identified 6 major lies it's built on, and so I want to make a case for a widespread cultural consideration where you just call the Church of Scientology the Xenu Grift. And oh, hi, welcome, Style Audit. Welcome everyone who's here. Wayne, glad to see you here. Sherry, Joe, it's good to see people here. Thanks for him. Any Aleister Crowley fans? Well, let me know if there are. So we like Thelemites. Um, so, the Xenu Grift should be used. I think it'd be a descriptive way to talk about Scientology. Is the Xenu grift. And I'm going to show you why some of the principal lies I've identified that support it. Yeah, thank you. Yeah, the Xenu grift. So the object of a grift, and I'm coming at this as a private investigator. And when I said professional cult watcher, I mean it. I've been our professional cult investigator. I have been paid as a private investigator to investigate cults and not just Scientology. And I always find they're a grift. And when you work on financial, civil, criminal, financial crimes, grift is like a term of art. It gets thrown around loosely, but I wanted to narrow in what big time grifters are, big time grifters, and how investigators, both police investigators, government investigators, and private investigators, we use the term maybe slightly differently than the public, and so there's a different mindset. Because someone fundraising is not grifting. Now that gets thrown around online in these attacks. I don't like to get involved in them. So hello, Warrior Queen. So I want to kind of show you why Scientology is fundamentally a grift from a professional perspective. And the term started, the term's been in use in America since probably, if you check the etymology, it came into being around the time of the gold rush, maybe a little bit earlier. Grifters were viewed as common. They were called after the Civil War here in America, 1860, 1864. There were a lot of people from the North who went into the South, the former Confederacy, and they were called carpetbaggers. But they were grifters, you know. Hey, welcome to the show, Poe. So grifting in America has been associated with what's called snake oil salesmen, people selling phony cures. But there's always an angle. There's always a lie. There's always a con, and it's typically criminal in nature. So grifting. I've seen some very sophisticated grifters. I've investigated. One of them uh, was a religious leader, but what I found his real background and his financial structure and how he had created shell corporations. This guy was a grifter. So when I talk about grifters, I'm not talking about like low level hustlers. But I'm talking about people who are actually engaged in criminality, exploitation, sometimes extortion, because grifting can get real ugly and it does involve, you can be a con artist, a hustler, a grifter. So maybe I'll create the spectrum of grifting, beginning with like low level people selling stupid shit on the internet that's worthless. Um, yeah, it is. It is. Thank you. Um, yeah, it is. Yeah, a grift underlines all cults. And the king of grifters, a lot of people think that it is Scientology, and they're certainly right up there. But I would say in terms of religious groups, the Latter-day Saints by far and away are the top grifters in America. They have somewhere probably gone over 200 billion in liquid cash in their summit group, and they're big time grifters. If we're looking at organized, professional, systematic wealth extortion, and that means not from the wealthy, but just taking money from everyday people. I consider the top level Mormons to be grifters. They want that 10%. And if you don't kick in that 10%, you can't go in the temple. You lose a lot of stuff. You're looked down upon. So grifting can also take place in different arenas. So you can have grifters that are freelancers. You can have grifters associated with cults and religions, and you can have grifters associated with um, coffin schemes, con schemes, pyramid schemes. So I'm just trying to expand the definition of grifting. Like I said, when someone goes online on YouTube and does a GoFundMe, I don't look at that as grifting. Uh, you know, I don't. It's just you're going on because you're trying to raise money, and people have the right to donate or not. With grifting, there's always time pressure, a con, a lie. There's always something you can spot as an outsider. Um, yeah, and here's Alice, Gina. The lies about OT being proved by my ex-husband and OT8 dying of cancer. Well, I'm sorry to hear it, but yeah, I'm going to show you a couple things. I'm going to come at this with Scientology material. So let's just go up and get into it. Well, to your point about it being a hustle, there's a spectrum, and it involves injury to the victim, amounts of money, and this is not subjective. These are how courts sentence criminals. They look at the impact to the victim, the financial cost, the emotional cost, the cost of lost opportunities. They look at all kinds of things. The cost in years you might have been locked into a con, like a multi-level marketing scam. So when grifters get sentenced to prison, that's probably a good way to talk about grifting on a spectrum. Is at a certain point, it's dishonest and opportunistic scheme and a lie and bullshit, but you're not going to get arrested. At a certain point, you can get sued, but not arrested. Then at a certain point, you will get arrested and go to jail, get convicted and go to jail. So Grant Cardone, he's obviously he's a self-admitted hustler, and that's on my spectrum of grifting that I'm working on. So I don't know that, Patrick. Are you thinking of David Gentili? Because Grant's, to my knowledge, not. I don't think. I think you may be confusing it. So I want to jump in. So that's the kind of the context I want to give it as I look at it as someone who works with frauds, cons, scams, cults professionally, and all kinds of people reach out to me, and I'm surprised that there's just as there's a spectrum of grifting and grifters. Some of the techniques they're really easy to spot once you know the techniques of grifting. Scientology more sophisticated in terms of a psychoterrorist approach tied to grifting. The idea of a master race of Homo novus or OT tied to grifting. So Scientology ties some of their doctrines to grifting. And then that's what makes it a cult. One aspect of a cult could be said a group that grifts, that takes money. And I'm going to show you from Hubbard's own words. So let's get into it. Now, I like this graphic because Scientology should be legally required to put caution hazardous cult signs outside of all of their orgs in the world. If I were the emperor, I would order them to do that. In fact, they wouldn't be in business. They would be basically disincorporated in their proceeds given to former Sea Org members and other victims, ex-members. And so I start with this way. The Xenu Grift is what I'm proposing we should use in language as one of the terms of the cult of Scientology is the Xenu Grift. Because obviously Xenu is a central part of their no longer secret OT levels, and it is a grift. And also known as, so that's it. Scientology obtains money, child labor, adult labor, real estate, and many other things by lying. And that's the essence of a grift is there's always a lie, a series of lies. So these are the 6 lies I'm going to do over this series. This is not going to be one video. I'm going to cover each of these topics as part of a grift and a lie that's designed purely to extract money and wealth from people, often who cannot afford it. It was up with the Chase Wave credit card fraud. So lie 1, and we're going to go into this. L. Ron Hubbard created what he called the doctrine of exchange, and that is if I give you something, you have to give me something back. Now, Scientology cannot engage in charity with that point of view, but they try to cover it. But the doctrine of exchange, I'm going to show that Scientology is completely out exchange. They're a complete rip-off lying. So they are grifters. Grifters will often promise you, hey, you do this for me, I'll do that for you, but it never materializes. Line number 2, Scientology's humanitarian group. That is something that has some real teeth to it that's never been explored. I want to do that especially looking at what's going on in Washington, D.C. and the interfaith movement, including Cheshire in Italy with Massimo and Trevigny. Scientology is the intersection of science and spirituality. That's what Scientology has been selling. And I wanted to just, I did a video recently where I took apart an e-meter, and I got out the software. I mean, I'm working in a lab. I'm doing measurement devices. And I got to tell you that the current leakage, the defects from component breakdown and all kinds of things. Scientology claims to be the intersection of science and spirituality, but part of the grift is that they have this was patented about 20 years ago. And so they have an obsolete consumer grade object called an e-meter, and that's part of the grift. But where that relates to psychoterrorism and the other worse cultic aspects, but Scientology as science is an old, obsolete couple of circuit boards put together in a meter. So part of the grift is that they're scientific and they're modern, but this is really old hardware. And so again, in grifts, they often have props. They often have contrivances, designs, devices. There's like Elizabeth Holmes with Theranos said, she could take just a sample of your blood and put it in a machine. She actually had hardware. So you can have hardware that's apparently scientific as part of a grift. And then you have pump and dump stocks. So I just want to show you Scientology's claim to be scientific, or the intersection of science and spirituality. That's part of the grift. They convince people that they have a scientific element when there is no science in Scientology. There's not even a scintilla of science in Scientology. Now, Scientology claims to be the most ethical group on the planet. This is interesting. I think that, for my opinion, is that they've backed off this line. They used to promote it externally, and in the PR, they're backing off this. And I think that's because they know they're liars, frauds, con artists. And so they're not going to really push this because they will get ridiculed for it. Scientology has millions of members. They are dancing around. This is part of the grift, is that they're bigger than they are. And I have some claims. I'm looking at their most recent claims, and now they're beginning to weaken on this. But as part of a grift, you'll say we're a big group. They used to stick with 12 million members. That was there for decades. They stuck with, we have 12 million members. Then it dipped to 8 million. So Their line number 6 as part of the grift is, hey, we don't practice fair game. We canceled fair game. That'll be another episode because there's a lot of legal filings. There's some legal things I want to bring to your attention. There's also some I'm trying to get a guest on, but this idea that they canceled fair game is false. So as part of their grift, these are the elements I want to take apart and analyze over maybe the next 6 or 10. And Scientology, here's my thesis. And if you're a researcher in academia or you're law enforcement or you want to contact me, I will be glad to explain this to you. I'm already talking with some people. But in Scientology, my thesis is that every activity is a grift. Scientology is fundamentally a transactional. Scientology is fundamentally a transactional cult, which means that everything is a grift. And you can define that in terms of a transaction. That is, you have to pay money, you have to sign a contract, you have to sign away your rights, you have to fill in the blank. So everything is a grift where Scientology wants something out of you and they intend to give you as little as possible in return. The essence of a grift is a power dynamic in which the grifter has all the power and you have none. And that's why when grifters get called out, they invariably flee. They fall apart, they lie, they claim you're lying, they attack you. So grifters can be quite vicious. Some of them run away, but every activity of Scientology is a grift. Everything that happens is a grift. That means someone's going to get exploited, lied to, used, transferred. They're going to be manipulated, threatened. So everything's a grift, and threats can be part of a grift because a grift is all encompassing. The grifter will do anything he or she has to get money from you or to get something from you they want. They want you to sign something. The IAS, the International Association of Scientologists, that's inherently a grift. That's purely taking money and giving you nothing in return except cheap, worthless trophies. Orgs are a grift, and I'm going to show that from Harvard Policy. A Scientology org or a church is a grift, and part of it is the Ideal Org Project, the real estate. Scientology gets wealthy, multi-billion dollars worth of real estate, and the parishioners, the people who paid for it, got stuck with the bills, and many of them are bankrupt. The whole premise of orgs that supposedly you're supposed to make auditors and grow orgs, that's not happening. LA is dead here. It's just nothing going on. I want to show how the Sea Org contract is a grift and how Scientology, the church of, the entire premise of the Sea Org is a grift. It's the exploitation of very young children who go into the Sea Org. It's the exploitation of teenagers who go in. It's the exploitation of adults who are in, and it's the exploitation of older people who get fitness boarded out because Scientology doesn't want to pay their expenses. There's no retirement, no overtime, nothing. So the entire premise of Sea Org is we want free labor. And that's a grift when you get people to work for you for free. That is a grift. Now, someone mentioned Grant Cardone, where I think he was grifting, and he did a video during the pandemic, and because they were being forced to shut down, and then they had to lay off some people. Grant Cardone did lay off people, and I have the evidence, and I showed it. And Grant tried to deny it when he talked to an influencer, and Grant tried to deny it, but no, he laid people off. And then I have on my blog where Elena and Grant said, we were surprised. We had to lay people off during the pandemic. And Grant said, I was surprised that no one showed up and offered to work for free. And Elena echoed him that Cardone Enterprises was so great that if they laid you off, you should just come in and work for free. Now, when Grant Cardone said that, he violated Hubbard's doctrine of exchange. He wanted something for nothing. But he represented, and this is part of a grift, Grant Cardone was representing that working for his company for free when their cash flow was down. Yeah, because that bitch doesn't cash flow like he says. I'd like to look at his books, which he'll never show. But Grant Cardone and Elena Cardone acted like the mere privilege of being in their presence and working for their company would more than compensate them working for free. That type of grift of come and work for me free is the same logic in the Sea Org. It's exploitation of people under a lie. In this case, Cardone said that working for his company, the value you would gain from sitting at his feet and learning how to like raise money, sell stuff would offset the value working for free. That's ridiculous. So grifting, again, that's a different element. But I think Cardone, in that sense, was clearly grifting, clearly wanting. He was grifting for labor, and so we're going to go back. So the Sea Org contract is a grift. The entire premise of the Sea Org is a grift. It's slave labor, including that of children. It's misery. You don't get, and we're going to go through the Sea Org and why it's a grift. And I want to make this point. I was talking to one of my friends, and he made this point, but I told him it was good enough for me to, borrow, and he said, sure. Every reg cycle is a grift. For new Scientology watchers, a reg is a registrar. They are the salespeople. They're called regs for short. So when they do a registration cycle or a reg cycle, every reg cycle is a grift. And we were talking about how in a reg cycle, if you've been in Scientology a long time, you're broke. You've maxed out your credit cards. So they start in with, who can you borrow money from? What equity do you have in your house? Where could you get the money? Who could you call? Do you have a cousin you could call? Let's get on the phone and call. Can we set you up with a Chase credit card or a U.S. Navy Federal Credit Union credit card? You can borrow it from this person. So every reg cycle is a grift. And the regs are grifters. The people in the Office of Special Affairs are grifters. You inherently have to engage in some kind of grifting to be in the Sea Org. And former Sea Org members, as not offense to you, if you were exploited, then you weren't grifting. But a lawful lot of Sea Org is grifting. That is being trying to either engage in fake PR or you're trying to engage in the politics of the Sea Org. So there's always, or you're trying to get money out of people. So there's always some form, some angle. When you have to, and at the base of that is stats every week at 2:00. Every Thursday at 2 p.m., you have to turn in your stats and then you have to improve them the following week and so on. And that's the idea of ever increasing, that statistics will rise infinitely, which they can't. And they get caught in the trap. And as a consequence of not wanting to get punished, they'll often issue false reports, which itself is a grift. So grift is defined this way: a group of methods for obtaining money falsely through the use of swindles, frauds, dishonest gambling, etc. Scientology fits that definition to a T. It's a group of methods, in fact, a systematic group of methods that was codified by L. Ron Hubbard and his successor, who's his illegitimate successor, David Miscavige. So it's a group of methods. And that's part of what I want you to understand about grifting. It's a group of methods. Grifters don't just use one tool. They use a group of methods to obtain money falsely through the use of swindles, frauds, dishonest gambling. And Scientology is a dishonest gamble. It's a fixed rigged casino. They'll often say if you flow power to the church, meaning give money to Scientology, it's the variation on the gospel of prosperity. Here, I just want to move this piece of equipment. So, and it says grifting is money obtained by these purposes. So that's the idea: is that it's grifting is a group of methods, and as such, because grifting involves a group of methods, because a hustle is usually one thing. Grifting especially at a cultic level, phony businesses, but cults. Let's go cover cults. Grifting is a series of methods, and that can include love bombing, where if you're an older man, you could have a lot of young, beautiful women giving you a lot of attention, and that's part of the grift to separate you from your money, because fools and their money are quickly separated. So that's one thing we want to know. Scientology does have a group a group of methods for obtaining money falsely, and this has been. I wanted to draw your attention to something here. We're going to go into some examples. Okay, where's my StreamYard? Let's go back here. Okay, so this is something I want to show you. This is a Hubbard grift. If you go into the green volumes, and I'm going to show that to you. In 1970, this is complete grifting. Okay, now staff members, not Sea Org, but staff members, staff members are those who who have not signed the billion-year contract and work full-time, but they can work, for 2.5 years or 5 years on a contract. And in the 1970s, L. Ron Hubbard wrote a policy called Moonlighting, Professional Series 10. And I'll read it. And he says that we'll start at it. He said, staff members of an org who have other jobs outside the org are said to be moonlighting. So Scientology orgs in the old days had a day foundation and a night foundation. The day people work during the day, and the night foundation, and I'm simplifying this, they would work in the evenings. So the org could be open from, say, 8 in the morning till 10 o'clock at night, whatever the hours were. But generally, they wanted to have 2 staff so they could man it. And Hubbard didn't like the fact that Scientologists might be taking 8 hours out of their day so they could support themselves working the org for free. So Hubbard says here, inflation, second paragraph, he says, as money inflates, purchases less, and as the cost of operating rises and fees remain unchanged, an org can get into a situation where it is inefficient and pays low salaries. Okay, so here's the situation. Hubbard's blaming inflation rather than demand, because as demand for Scientology goes down, orgs will bring in less money. So he has a wrong why. So, and he's also citing inflation, which was really hitting hard in the 70s, all the way through the Carter recession. Inflation hit hard. Don't think boomers didn't go through inflation. My second mortgage for a house I bought in Sherman Oaks was a 12% loan, and I had great credit for a mortgage. So mortgages got really high, but it's still tough. But I'm just saying. Okay, so Hubbard here is saying that as a result of increasing costs and inflation, the org has to pay low salaries, or what he's not saying is they're not going to pay any salaries. Now, because you have to eat, if you're not making any money as a Scientology staff member, you would go out and get a job, and that's called moonlighting, having other fish to fry. So Hubbard, and I bolded this in yellow, he says, moonlighting on the government would be quite permissible. With governments anxious to hand out welfare in some depressed area, it would be quite all right to go on the dole and relief and work as a church volunteer in the org. So right there, Hubbard is saying, go collect welfare from the government under fraudulent pretenses. Go on the dole. Go get whatever money you can get so you can work full-time for Scientology as a church volunteer. So this is actually Hubbard telling people to defraud the government, and it gets worse. He says the higher unemployment rises, the less money we'll buy, the more finance trouble there is. Our org staffs under such duress can live as monasteries for food and shelter and pocket money and keep an org going. But then listen to the subsidy. He says, at this writing, the only subsidies from the government are for those who kill people. The money the government should be spending to support our orgs goes to special interest groups like psychiatry who pocket it and deliver nothing. Up the years, this may change. Until it does, we have to keep our heads up financially. This is really an interesting quote, and I'll put it on my blog. But Hubbard basically said that he expected that the government should be subsidizing Scientology. And it does. It does it through tax exemption. It does it through providing police and fire services. It does it every time a SEERG member goes to the county hospital and poses as an indigent. And there's actually a write-up on how to pose as an indigent and get free medical services from the county. All the forced abortions were paid for by taxpayers. The fundamental grift is that L. Ron Hubbard wants people to work for free, and the Sea Org, they'll give you a stipend of what, $50 a week if your org makes its numbers, but he has to at least give them food and clothing at a very minimal level and a roof over their head, so you get into a cot. But everything else, if you can go get money from welfare, and it gets worse. So Hubbard actually, in moonlighting, which is why it's such a powerful policy to know about. And I'll scan the actual policy. It's longer than this. I've edited some of it for presentation. But Hubbard gives permission to go on welfare and steal from the taxpayers so that you can work at your church. That's outright fraud. And that's part of grifting. And this is probably criminal fraud since it's written with intent. This is another reason why Scientology should lose its tax exemption. This is a clear violation of public policy or the law to tell people to go collect welfare. Now, Hubbard himself wrote, first, consider a group which takes money in but does not deliver anything in exchange. This is called ripoff. It is the exchange condition of robbers, taxmen, governments, and other criminal elements, like Scientology. So Hubbard said that it's if you took in money and didn't give anything in exchange, that's ripoff. That's the exchange of robbers, taxmen, governments, and other criminal elements. Well, but just previously, Hubbard had been saying, go rip off the government, go on the dole, get welfare money so you can work for Scientology. Well, by Hubbard's own exchange, that would be criminal because you're taking, but you're not giving anything back to the government. You're just taking welfare money, assistance money meant for the truly poor. You're taking it so you can work for Scientology. That's grifting. That's a crime. And yet Hubbard's saying that to do that is rip off. It's what robbers, taxmen, governments, and other criminal elements do. This IES application, if you go down 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, fifth paragraph, it says, I also understand that membership dues, donations, and contributions are not refundable. So even the IAS, if you give them money, you don't get anything in return. You get a tax write-off, and you get a fake trophy, but you don't get anything else. And if you donate and you need the money back, you don't get it. So this is another part of grifting. Another part of Scientology grifting is that nothing's refundable by contract. You sign and you say, I agree to arbitration. They have a thing on getting a repayment of money on account you haven't spent, but that's, in my experience, impossible. They just write you a letter saying that there's no law. Monique Yingling has put this out. There's no law in the United States requiring a church to return any money. So Scientology will make you all kinds of promises, but it won't. When it comes time to getting your money back, they'll tell you, put that $100,000 on money's on account. And if you decide you're no longer a Scientologist, they'll say, nope. They may make a thing of putting you through the chaplain cycle to get your repayment. But that's just really intended to, my opinion, and I have several people I could put on the stand in court. I could give to prosecutors when they go after the church. That's just a runaround. That turns into years and years to where you give up. And then once you legally abandon your claim, you're screwed. So the whole design intent of Scientology as a grift is to keep all your money that comes in. To make any kind of promise, inducement, flattery, lie, but never give any of the money back. And to get the money in, of course, they pay commissions to fundraisers. So that's quite something, that is quite something. And I'm looking for something here. So if you consider that design element, that fits the classic definition of grifting, is to separate you from your money by any way possible, and then make it impossible to get any of that money out. So just give me a minute here. Well, I'll pull that over there and look for it there. Brendano, I'm looking for a thing called statements by staff members to kind of show you the grifting. So just give me a minute. Okay, now let's go back to this while I look for that. Okay, so the money goes in. It's like a Roach Motel with credit card fraud. And that's what ABC Mouse, Doug Dorian's company, was found guilty of. Money goes in, but will never come out. Here in America, we had, during the pandemic, the government was trying to help keep companies in business. So they gave out PPP loans. Scientology received at least 30 loans. It's more, but they wound up getting closer to 4 million. This article from Daily Mail by Rachel Sharp says 3 million. I kept counting and found 4 million. This included Narconon. Again, this is Hubbard saying, take the money. And all these loans were forgiven. So Scientology, even though it had billions of dollars in reserves, still grifted the government on PPP loans. And this was quite something. So she's got it wrong here. The Church of Scientology, an estimated worth close to $2 billion. Is much higher than that. It's gone way past the 3 billion we've discussed in the past. So that's another form of grifting, is where can we go to take every penny? The Schwab Foundation donates money to Scientology orgs, as do other foundations whose job is to, give out money. And that's quite something. That is quite something. So that's another form of grifting, is to take money from the government, even when Hubbard hates the government and the tax man, and he calls taking something for nothing criminal. They do it. So grifting is very much part of it. David Gentili, before he was convicted, his company took out 2.2 million in PPP loans. The bank took it back after he was indicted, and Gentili sued to try to get that 2.2 million because he knew he could probably get loan forgiveness. And I got to tell you, just to go on a tangent on Gentili, I was rereading a Commonwealth of Massachusetts civil lawsuit against them, Securities Exchange Commission, the Kenny Ma lawsuit. David Gentili, the breathtaking, staggering amount of greed and dishonesty and deceit out of that man is utterly disgusting. It's utterly disgusting. I wish he were looking at 100 years in prison. But talking about grifting, David Gentili is the ultimate grifter. His wife was in on it. His father was in on it. And there were other people too. There were at least 25 Scientologists in on it. GPB Capital was, I'll put it really simply, a huge fucking grift led by a criminal. And his accomplice, Jeffrey Schneider. Talk about a grifter. David Gentili, complete fucking grifter. He should be ashamed of himself. He's not. His family should disown him, but they were, to the degree that some of them were in on it. And that's $1.7 billion. So this guy, along with Schneider, major grifter. And you know what? Scientology knew, they saw the evidence. They probably put him in sec checks. They didn't do anything to shut him down or reform him. And this case is just going to get bigger because more is going to come out from this thing. So grifting as an organization, as a cult that grifts, Scientology teaches its members to grift. Because you know what? We can go through the history of Scientology, and there's always these MLMs, there's always these cons. There were blue laundry balls back in the 90s. You can Google Scientology and blue laundry balls, where these Scientologists were selling these blue plastic balls you threw into your laundry, and it was supposed to take the place of detergent and save you all the money and save the environment. But the balls, the lab in Oregon, the state lab, found out they were just filled with water. It was a con. Reed Slacken was a con. So this, because Scientology is a grift, Xenu's grift, it spawns other grifters. It empowers other grifters. There's a culture, as I've always said, of pervasive criminality within Scientology. The Regis, the credit card, the Chase credit card fraud were grifters. So you have this, the master grift is the Church of Scientology and David Miscavige, RTC. And as long as they get a cut of the money coming in, it's a grift. And it's a method they use. There's a very interesting, what's his name? Sonnenfeld. I'm going to show you how the methodology. Okay, yeah, here we go. There was a fellow named David Sonnenfeld, and I'm going to share the screen on this. So anyway, Gentili's far from over. I'm going to probably go to New York for this. I want to hear him. I want to be there when he's sentenced. So I will probably take that flight back if my schedule opens up. Now, grifting has to have a method to it. And again, I'm doing this so that people don't just, you can throw around the word grifting. I don't have anything on it if you want to do it, but I'm just giving you, this was a Scientologist salesperson, secrets for getting money fast. In Scientology, there's always these hat packs. Those are just job descriptions because you wear a hat. Your job's called your hat. And David Sonnenfeld, this is a PDF. This was widely distributed through orgs, the Sonnenfeld method. And this is how Sonnenfeld looked at it. Because I said every reg cycle is a grift. This supports my thesis exactly. Here are the types of valuables that the public wanting to go up the bridge have presented to me, or they had access to or possession of in some way. So even before you walk in, they're going to be looking at your checking accounts, business, personal, other types of checking accounts, savings account, money market accounts. And, they have bonds, retirement accounts, IRA, children's college expenses. So as grifters, they micro-target it and they pass on this tribal knowledge of how to grift, how to extract wealth. Now I'm sure they're asking, so that's an actual method. So grifting features methods and techniques when you're doing organized criminality or grifting. So we have the evidence here. And also L. Ron Hubbard used big league selling. So that's also part of the grift. And I'm sure now they're asking Scientologists, would you have crypto? Because Grant Cardone and Gary Cardone talk a lot about crypto. So they're going to say, well, what money do you have? If you don't have money, you must have ways to get other forms of money, and who can you borrow it from? How can we arrange to take out a loan, put a third mortgage on your house? So you have to be thinking. So I want to pivot here. So that's part of the grift. It's definitely financial, and I got to tell you that I've gotten calls since Gentili's conviction from investors, and he hurt a lot of people. So I'm going to go off that side. I'm going to go to another slide. The Sea Org is a grift. And this is a point I wanted to make. The Sea Org is a grift. This is the Sea Org contract you sign. And clause 2, it says, I further understand that all church staff members, including myself, are members of a religious order, that they serve pursuant to their religious obligations and not in contemplation of receiving any compensation whatsoever. and in doing so that they are forsaking all commercial and financial motivation. Please initial. Um, each considers himself, herself a volunteer to create a better world and understands that he, she is not an employee. That is not entitled to receive secular benefits such as minimum wage or overtime compensation. So the Sea Org as a grift, you have to agree that you're not going to make any money. That this is basically Scientology stripping you of any right to make money. You don't get minimum wage. You don't get anything, and you don't get a pension. And one increasing problem I've mentioned, I'm dealing with our older Sea Org members saying, "Hey, I was in the Sea Org for 30 years. Now I can't get Social Security. I don't have any money. I'm broke." And they're in their 60s or 70s and they're broke and they didn't pay in the system, but they volunteered to be religious workers, and the church never explained to them. They had to do this following this contract wasn't always in place. So look at that. And then you're declaring a spiritual commitment on the Sea Org contract, which is part of a grift. Because to the extent that Scientology teaches their regs to engage in criminal behavior, this is just coding a grift or a method of thievery in religious cloaking. That's all it's doing. They want you to be a religious order which has no legal form of existence. And you have to reiterate you're not doing it for money. You forsake all commercial and financial motivation. So the thing about this is Scientology wants all the money. Scientology wants every penny it can get through having its members get public assistance or welfare if they can. If they're injured, go to county hospitals so the taxpayer can pick up the money. If they need dental work, figure out a way for someone else to pay because the church won't. If they need anything and they can get it, take PPP loans, take money from foundations. So Scientology wants all the money, but they want their Sea Org, their free labor, whom they're exploiting and destroying often and putting in a very, PTSD condition where when they leave, they're going to be damaged. So Scientology is part of the grift. You have to be willing to destroy people, lie to them, cheat, steal, and destroy. Fair game allows Scientology to destroy people, but you have to realize it is more profound than that. Fair game applies to even Sea Org workers and staff and public members, because Hubbard greenlights his people. Hubbard greenlights people who work for the church to destroy children, to destroy adults, to destroy teenagers, to destroy old people. It's not just SPs who are fair gamed. That means can be harmed, injured, lied to, tricked, deceived. Sea Org members can be harmed, lied to, tricked, deceived. The children who join the Sea Org or who are born into the church can be lied, tricked, to, deceived. And really, a public can be lied, tricked, or deceived to get their money, because that's part of a grift. So Scientology fair games its own members. They're just not putting up hate websites. They're instead destroying their wealth and taking all their money or putting them into a free labor where we get free labor, you get nothing. All the money goes to us. All the benefit goes to us. We own all the real estate. You get nothing. And that's a form of destroying other people's wealth, their happiness, their freedom of choice. And that's malicious to think about, but it's true. Scientology destroys its own members as part of the grift. Scientologists, if you think Scientology is supporting you, you have to honestly ask yourself, when have you been exploited, lied to, cheated, and you had to go along with it because the consequences are so draconian of losing your family, your income, your job. So the grift is not just outward to the public, it's outward to the general public. Scientology grifts from its own members. There's even Sea Org members who donate to the IS. They don't have the money, they borrow it from family. So Scientology even expects its Sea Org members to buy basics libraries, contribute to the Ideal Org, contribute to the IS. So Scientology is grifting and it's cannibalizing itself and it's destroying its own members. It's fair games its own members while they're still in. That's the terror of a ComEv or a sec check. So when you take apart the Sea Org contract, you can see that it's designed to basically make slaves. It's designed to make slaves, and that's part of a grift is you enslave people. That way they work for you for free. That's an optimal situation. That occurs in so many MLM, multi-level marketing schemes. A lot of sales jobs are commission only. You work for us and you take all the risk, and we get the reward and you get a cut. But in Scientology, Patrick says, well, why do people sign the billion-year contract? That's an episode I'd like to interview like 24 people on why they signed the billion-year contract. A lot of them did it because they felt it was a noble cause. Some people felt pressured. People have come in from, I interviewed a Sierra member, Katrina, who came in from Siberia with her mother. Her mother brought her in when she was a child. And Katrina really had no choice. When you're born into Scientology, you don't have anywhere to go to get fed. You don't have a high school diploma when you're young. You don't have anything you can do. You go into the Sierra because it's the only way you're going to be able to eat and have a very subsistence existence. So, you know what? It would amaze, but when you're in that context, when you're in a grift and you're being lied to, and look, there's a thing called noble cause narcissism, and Hubbard had that where he created what he said was a noble cause of clearing the planet, but actually in his narcissistic, cruel, slave driving way, he gave you a noble cause to sacrifice yourself to that he himself did not believe in, and he himself was enriching him by, and he was willing to destroy you if you looked at him wrong. So in context, the noble cause appeals to good people and they sign, or they need to stay in the Sea Org to subsist. And that would be interesting because a question that gets asked quite a bit is when people open the OT3 levels for the first time and read about Xenu, how do they react? Now, that question's been explored and it's always interesting to hear, but I'd like to do videos on why did you sign your Sea Org contract? And I've heard stories, I've heard different stories. Why did you sign it? What made you? And if we could get like 30 stories and then you find out the most common reasons people signed, like taking apart that decision making. Tommy Davis, Ann Archer's son, he was set to go to, I believe, Stanford University. And I believe it was Stanford, I could be wrong, but he was set to go to an Ivy League school. And he gave that up to go into the Sea Org. And I don't know if his mother was upset. That had to be something else. So that's what we're going to cover for today. So I'm hoping to like relanguage this thing and basically, call it the grift, the Xenu grift. The Xenu grift, and I'm going to explore this. And like I said, I have like 6 major lies. Today we just talked about the doctrine of exchange. Hubbard said you have to, if you get something, you have to give back. That makes common sense, except as we just to summarize, Hubbard said it's okay for Scientologists to take welfare, to go on the dole, public relief, money intended for the truly poor. He said it's okay to take that money so that you could work for Scientology for free. Scientology took PPP loans, that's taxpayer dollars that they never paid back. They got loan forgiveness. And they take money wherever they can get. They will never give money back unless they get sued or forced to, or unless it's the Chase Wave credit card fraud, they'll never give anything back. So we basically laid down the foundation for the grift. And what I want to do in future interviews, I want to go with like this idea. Part of the grift is that they're a humanitarian group. That's part of the grift. Saying that they're part of the intersection of science and spirituality, that also is part of the grift, the tech. And we're going to go into some really damning stuff about what they say versus what their contracts actually say. For example, Scientology promises you miracles, and yet when you sign the contract, it says Scientology does not make any promises about anything, and neither did Hubbard. So when you really look at that, when you look at the grift, what they're doing is a grift, but they're making you sign contracts of which you may not be aware of the full legal what you're giving up to keep their grift legal, or at least keep it where they can try to put it into arbitration. Scientology is the most ethical group on the planet. That's clearly a grift. That's just a lie they tell themselves so they don't have to confront the horror of what they're up to. Scientology has millions of members. There's been a little bit of moving the line on this, and that I want to go into. What they say here in the US, what they say in other countries. This is an interesting thing when we go into what the members are. So, and then Scientology cancel fair game. They have pushed that for the last, since Leah Remini's first season, where she exposed it to a large part of the public of new Scientology watchers. They tried to argue they've canceled fair game. But as I've made the point, they fair game their own members. They actually do. If you get on the wrong side of somebody in Scientology, you will be fair gamed. And if we define fair game as the wanton destruction of people, they do that to their children. They do that to kids who are in the Sea Org, who are born into Scientology. They destroy their own young, and they destroy older people as well. In fact, they destroy anyone. And so fair game doesn't have to just be directed against suppressive persons. If we define fair game as grifting and exploitation and using and destroying, then Scientology fair games everyone, and it's designed to fair game everyone. That is, it's designed to exploit everyone. Every member, every part of Scientology is designed to exploit every person to the maximum degree possible while putting out the minimum amount of expense. That's why Sea Org members, they want the maximum amount of work for them for no money or very little money, maybe $47 a week or $50. They want the maximum amount of production, 100-hour plus work weeks, paying the minimum amount, eating rice and beans for dinner, sleeping in a bunk, working 6 to 7 days a week. Sometimes you get a half day off to do your laundry. So anyway, that's it. So we're going to talk about the Xenu grift in the next couple of episodes. And so this was the first one. We're right at an hour. Any questions before we close up? I think I have to do a little bit of Hubbard because I like to do that. So we just pick at random because people like it when I read Hubbard. I've got, by the way, the moonlighting section, which I'm going to scan in PDF. It comes in Management Series 1. So that's where you're going to find the thing on moonlighting. But like I said, I'm going to turn it into a PDF so you can actually read it. I think it should be distributed widely. Here's something. This is really interesting. Well, this is part of the grifting. I'm not going to go into that. Wow, I wish we had more time. Yeah, I'm sorry. I get this is some really screwed up stuff here. I'm gonna put a post-it note because I want to definitely cover that with you next time. Hubbard's talking about crime, and it's pretty wow, it's pretty effed up. Okay, here's something in Hubbard's. We'll just end with some fun. Hubbard, he says, a madman can't tolerate plus points, and he doesn't see them either. but there can be a lot of plus points around and no production. Thus, one can be told how great it all is while the place edges over to the point of collapse. An evaluator who listens to people on the scene and takes their whys runs a grave risk. If these were the whys, then things would be better. A far safer way is to talk only insofar as finding what the product is concerned and investigating. See, this is like you can read Hubbard and it's just babble. It's just babble going on. Anyway, may I find your mailing address? My CCH box. Pam, if you email me, I don't have it out, but if you email me, I'll send it to you. It's jeffreyaugustine@gmail.com. Your recent CCHR, yeah, they've been doing some crazy stuff. Yeah, this is a nice shirt. Kind of a nice. Yeah, see me. Okay, are we staying with one episode a week? Well, I'm gonna try, Joe. I've been really busy. I was on this case that wound up, so I'm gonna try to do more than once a week. I'm gonna try to do 2 or 3 times a week, and I tend to do a lot of prep. I don't do like extemporaneous, but I'm gonna try to do more. So for this 6-pointer, I'll try to do it in the next like 3 or 4 days, and because Karen and I have a couple of businesses we run, and it keeps us busy, and sometimes I have to go on a deep dive for a client, and sometimes it involves a civil trial, and it gets just your time goes by. Oh, thank you. I appreciate it. Yeah, the Hubbard impersonation, the ramblings of a. Okay, I'll give you a little bit more since people, I enjoy it too. Now, listen. Now, this is important stuff. This is again, try to follow along. This illustrates the point. The grift of Scientology, the Xenu grift, has its own language system, which makes it impervious to outsiders. And I can speak Scientologies. It's something I acquired over many years to get the context and subtleties. But imagine having to spend your lifetime reading this. Altered sequence is a primary block to investigation. At first glance, omitted data would seem to be the block. On the contrary, it is the end product of an investigation, and it is what pulls an investigation along. One is looking for omitted data. An altered sequence of actions defeats an investigation. Examples: we will hang him and then conduct a trial. We will assume who did it and then find evidence to prove it. A crime should be provoked to find who commits them. Man, that's crazy stuff. The LRJ. Tina in the last 20 has been identified as a possible suppressive who works for psychiatry. She's with the psychs, obviously, from Arcadia. She's come here on a flying saucer, you see, what we call a flying saucer. Actually, just interstellar means of the bus. In other words, she took the Marcab bus here to the Marcab Greyhound station. Yeah, it gets kind of fun. That's why if you don't laugh, you'll cry if you don't find some humor in it. So anyway, that's it. The Xenu grift is what I'll be exploring, and 6 of the lies. We got through that first one. I'll leave without Alice Cheetah's comment because that's interesting. The ex-husband that I mentioned earlier, who is an OT that is dying of cancer, spent most of his life grifting for the cult by being a reg. I would like to interview you, Alice, if you're available. The life of a reg. Yeah, the regs are the chief grifters, and they have such an intense system, and they're actually allowed to look in a person's PC folders so they can find out what a pre-clear is doing, covering and auditing a public, Scientologist. And regs are allowed to go through these auditing folders, which are supposed to be religious confessionals. So they just shit can the priest penitent privilege, and we saw that in the Deichler case. And they can look for your buttons. So if you have some area of ruin or something you need help on, the regs take that information in a predatory manner and use it to psycho-target you to get a donation. So if you have something that's bothering you, yeah. The pause, yeah, Hubbard did that a lot. We went to actually, and I think it could be because he has to make up shit on the spot. I don't doubt it. Yeah, because you see, factually, the dad runner AI is an implant, and right now he is attacking the source of Scientology. Dad runner, does it say Al or A? What does it? David, I have my assistant David Miscavige. David Miscavige, have you shined my boots? Yes, I want to wear my fancy cowboy boots, the silver ones from Marcavia. Yes, David, you'll have to shine my shoes as well. Yes. I did step in something in the park, and you're going to have to clean those, David. Can you imagine? Miss Gavage used to be around Shoe Shine Boy. Yeah, it is a word salad. So anyway, with that, the Xenu Grift, think about it, play with it on social media, see if that's worthy of a name. But I just wanted to with all the grifting throwing around, I want to show you how I look at grifting and Scientology. I'll do this spectrum of grifting, and I can identify different parts of Scientology do different parts of the grift, because some, like OSA, specializes in part of the grift where the regs do another part of the grift. So as we break down the Xenu grift, and Xenu is part of the grift. Space Lord Xenu and BTs are definitely part of the grift, and we're going to get to that. So with that in mind, wish you all the best until we see you next time. So again, this was like a structural presentation. A lot of what I do is educational in nature, and I wish I had something more fun, but I'm going to educate my particular audience who likes the details, and give you the exact Hubbard references, like the David Sonnenfeld hat pack. I'll put that up, and that you can give to law enforcement. You can give it to influencers on social media. You can promote it yourself on your website. But I kind of want to show you how they actually do it. There's a saying, you don't want to see how meat is made. An old saying, you don't want to see how meat is made, meaning you don't want to go into a slaughterhouse. Well, my argument is you don't want to see how Scientology is made, but you need to understand how the con works, how the dishonesty and the grift works. So with that, we'll be back next time as we do the series. And Joy, we'll try to do it in the next few days, because I do want to do more YouTube. Not that I'm particularly great at it, but I enjoy doing it. And I'm staying in my lane of money, crimes, lies, legal matters. So and other stuff I'm just not good at. And a man's got to know his limits, as Dirty Harry said. So with that, we'll see you next time. Thank you for watching. Hope you have a great holiday tomorrow. And how do we want to end?